Welcome to episode 100. It's a special milestone for us here with the GTO and 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G, and we cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes. It's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. So let's get started with my first topic. And I attended the big 5G event this year. I've attended this event in years past. It ping pongs between Denver and Austin, so it came back to Austin this year. I will say attendance was much greater than it was last year, as we were still kind of coming out of the pandemic there in Denver. I'm sure Light Reading will have an official total and tally. I would estimate there were at least 1,000 folks there. It was over 3 days. The first day was focused on an Intel Builders event for developers, is my understanding, as well as a 6G track. I did not attend those, so I did attend days 2 and 3. Had a lot of meetings, attended the keynotes, attended some breakouts as well. And I guess there wasn't really anything earth-shattering from my perspective, although Chris Pearson, who leads the 5G Americas and someone that both Anshel, you and I are very close to, he and I had a discussion, and he also presented in a couple of the forums. And one of the stats I believe that he shared was around 5G SA. And so standalone truly will unlock the true promise of 5G. I was encouraged to see that in 2022, about 100 operators in over 50 countries are either trialing, in the midst of developing and deploying standalone networks. And that's great news. In the US, T-Mobile continues to be the only standalone network deployment, but we should see now AT&T and with Verizon, with their C-band assets, begin to deploy their networks as well. So again, that was my biggest takeaway. I know that you couldn't attend the event this week, but was there any news that caught your eye?
Yeah, I think the one was that well, it was a buy thing where T-Mobile talked about expanded coverage of 5G, and also that they are I'm not sure if this happened at the big 5G event, but I think it happened during, which was that they're expanding their wholesale business and signing lots of contracts, re-signing a lot of their existing customers.
Right.
And that Dish set some of its growth plans, saying that they were, I want to say, trying to hit something like 40 million customers and 20% of the enterprise market. Well, I'm not sure they'll be able to hit 40 million. But they didn't really say when that will happen, so it could happen in 10 years.
Right.
But I actually think that 20% of the enterprise market is probably much more likely, just because I feel like a lot of what they're doing is very like enterprise focused on the infrastructure side. And I think they're setting themselves up for success there. So we'll see what happens with Dish, but it was interesting. I saw some other big 5G event announcements, but to your point, there weren't that many that were particularly newsworthy. I think a lot of it was just kind of like giving everybody's updates on where they're at and what they're thinking.
Yeah, business as usual for sure. Yeah, I caught some news on Dish. One of the things that I've spoken about in prior podcasts is around that 1 million prepaid subscribership that they acquired through the divestitures that T-Mobile had to make when the Sprint acquisition came together, as well as they're picking up an MVNO, and Boost is sort of kind of the lead there. They did have some, not so great news about a week ago where they have lost a lot of those subscribers. That was going to be their beachhead from my perspective to build 5G service, delivery, at least for consumer, on top of. They have this coverage target they're going to have to meet during the summer time frame, or they risk a big fine. I think they'll probably get a reprieve on that as well. But getting back to T-Mobile, I did have a chance to spend time with Neville Ray. We had a one-on-one. One of the things I was struck with is just, again, the continued success of their fixed wireless access business. During his keynote, he did speak to the fact that they've hit 1 million subscribers and that they have plans to hit 5 to 7 million within the next 12 to 18 months. That's pretty aggressive. It's probably a 2-year plus horizon from my perspective. I could be misquoting those numbers, but long and the short of it, T-Mobile's seen a lot of success, and they're seeing a lot of success in rural as well. And I believe one of the stats was that they're covering about a third of those subscribers are in the rural areas of the U.S. So they're definitely doing their part to bridge the digital divide. So it was a great 2 days. It was great to be back in person. And again, really enjoyed, a lot of the meetings I had and the breakouts. There was one breakout, AT&T and Cisco presented together, talking about private 5G. I shared some insights on Twitter that day. So if you're interested, go hit my handle at Willtown Tech. But let's move to your first topic this week. And there's news out of India. It seems like they're now in a position, right, to begin to deploy 5G.
Yes. The best way of putting this is India is finally getting it together. India has lagged the rest of the world in 5G deployments. China is well ahead and they're next door. And then obviously the US and Europe have already deployed 5G with most carriers.
Mm-hmm.
There are other places. The Middle East is already fairly well deployed, obviously not geographically, but that's still far ahead of where India is today. India still hasn't even auctioned off the spectrum. And this is actually very similar to the problem that they had with 4G, where 4G spectrum was not made available early enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think the case with 5G is still better than it was with 4G. But I think the lack of 4G actually hampered India's economy's growth.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think that, the slow deployment of 5G is also going to impact India because they're going to lag in terms of development and deployment so that when 5G use cases do come out, networks won't be ready. So the thing that's going to happen is the spectrum auction is finally happening. If I recall correctly, it was supposed to have happened in like 2021, if not
Right.
2020.
We've talked about that before. Yeah,
we've talked about on previous podcasts. I think it was supposed to be like mid 2021 and it slipped to late 2021. Now it's mid 2022. So in June. And then the first rollouts will happen sometime in October. But the expectation is that 5G services will be available in limited areas of 30 to 50 cities by March. So realistically, the actual usable deployments will probably be sometime in that time frame of March 2023, which is almost 4 years after 5G launched in the US and Korea.
Right.
So that's still a considerable lag in my opinion.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the first year of 5G with millimeter wave was not particularly beneficial to anyone. So I'll say that first year was a bit early.
Yeah.
So let's say a 3-year head start. That's still pretty bad for India.
Right.
But they're going to take advantage of existing telecom infrastructure from Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung. And there is a possibility that they could actually start to deploy Open RAN. It's still up in the air what that will look like in India.
Right.
But they're saying that the first phase will have 1,000 towers in each city, and that there will be 4,000 towers total in New Delhi. And the usual suspects of Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung are going to be supplying the hardware. But the spectrum that they're planning to deploy for 5G are 700, 800, 900, 1.8, 2.1, 2.3, 2.5, and 3.3 to 3.6, which are all very similar to the spectrum that already exists today.
Right.
But I have a feeling that there's not going to be that much spectrum in each band available, which is probably why they have to have so many different bands available for 5G spectrum.
Yeah.
And those lower 3 bands are not necessarily going to have particularly good performance.
Hmm.
But those will probably provide coverage, while the other bands will probably provide much more performance and that mid-band kind of speed. So that's kind of the expectation with India right now. Other than that, Ericsson and Nokia are already running 5G trials with Bharti Airtel and Vodafone, and Samsung is carrying a 5G trial with Reliance Jio. So
Yeah.
trials are already happening, but it's unfortunately very slow.
Yeah, and I think, you touched on Open RAN, and I think that's an opportunity for that market. I mean, obviously, CapEx is a challenge, and I haven't really dug into, well, I mean, the spectrum auctions haven't even occurred yet, right? So we'll have to see how that all nets out. But, certainly Open RAN could provide an opportunity to, from a CapEx perspective, to save a little bit there. But as I've discussed on prior podcasts, there are integration challenges with that as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it all rolls out. Reliance has proven to be very aggressive and nimble and agile in that market when you look at what they've done with their LTE build out. So I personally expect to see Reliance sort of leading the pack, but it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. But we will keep our eyes and ears open and report back probably on a future podcast. But with that, let's move to my second topic this week. And I caught some really interesting news around BT Group, and they're testing quantum radio technology for future 5G deployments. And I found this quite interesting. So I'm gonna read a little bit, from this news release that I found. But what this does is these receivers basically excite or agitate atoms to achieve what's considered to be 100 times greater sensitivity than conventional radio equipment. And so it's an atomic radio frequency, type solution. And it promises to not only bolster capabilities of future 5G and IoT networks, but also reduce energy consumption. So there is an OpEx benefit to it as well. I think it's pretty cool. We've heard about quantum computing, quantum networking, and now quantum radio. So what do you think?
I cannot say that I am a expert in wireless radio theory,
Mm-hmm.
but I will actually look into it more to try and understand it. Keyword being try. But in theory, I can understand how that would be an interesting concept because if you're exciting atoms, you don't actually have to operate through air. You could operate through any medium if you tune your frequency correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be really interesting for underwater networking, or it could be really interesting for transmitting radio through walls and other kinds of objects that are probably problematic. So I think there could be some really interesting theories that could be tested, and potentially, we find certain bands of quantum radio, can pass through any concrete wall, or can send a signal 5 times farther at a certain frequency. So I think there's a lot of potential there, but I definitely need to look into it more and understand what that could potentially mean. Maybe that's something that we use with 6G. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. Well, your insights were clearly and more intelligent than probably mine. And I always like to say I'm not an engineer, but I play one on TV. But it's definitely interesting technology. And to your point, it could factor into 6G with terahertz and propagation and that sort of thing. So, but that's something that we'll dig into, and it might make for an interesting follow up on a future podcast. But let's move to your second topic. And there's news from Rakuten Mobile in a 5G fixed wireless access deployment that's planned.
Yeah, so Rakuten's kind of expanding its services in Japan. They said that they expect to launch fixed wireless access in Japan in December, um, and that they're just waiting for their CPE devices to arrive so they can roll that out and test it. Unfortunately, it sounds like they're having some supply chain issues with those. which doesn't really surprise me. Everyone's having them. But they also said that their FWA will run, or their fixed wireless will run on 6 and millimeter wave.
Hmm.
And that they're not only trying to roll out mobile services, but also rolling out fiber to the home,
Right.
um, and using FWA for wireless to the home. So I think it's going to be very interesting. They're still in an expansion mode, um, and I think that they want to, gain as many customers as they can, and in many ways as possible.
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about all the things that are happening with Rakuten, and on an innovation front. But their 4G network is solid now. But they definitely have some work to do on their build out of their 5G network,
Hmm.
and obviously profitability as well. Um, but being a new network operator is never easy, as Dish has shown us as well.
Right.
So I think they're on the right path, and we'll see what that looks like down the road as 5G use cases start to become more clear. But it's good to see Rakuten is kind of taking the um, expected path, I guess,
Right.
in terms of uh, adding new customers. Everyone's pretty much following the expectations that you and I both have had, that FWA is going to be a big opportunity for 5G, and lo and behold, it's starting to become one.
Yeah, and speaking, I'll mention Chris Pearson again with 5G America's little call out there. We'll need to tag them on our post this week. Um, we were sort of talking about use cases, and FWA is kind of bubbling up as one of the key sort of broader use cases for 5G. This doesn't surprise me to hear this, coming from Rakuten. I mean, it's going to be a great ARPU, upside for them. It naturally fits into what they're trying to do. I also like the fact they're going to focus on millimeter wave, assuming for urban deployment, sort of last mile of fiber, to the point that you're making earlier, and then leveraging that mid band for getting distance and propagation. So I think it's a smart move on their part, and we'll keep our eyes and ears open on that one as well. But let's move to my third and final topic this week, and I've been talking about this on prior podcasts, the Ericsson Cradlepoint combination. And officially, news came out this week that in June, a new business group is going to be launched. It's going to discreetly focus on private 5G. It's going to be a new business unit. It appears that they're going to go direct to enterprise. And so the question that came to my mind is, can they fully compete with a more established Nokia Enterprise that's been doing this for quite some time? I think they can. Cradlepoint has enjoyed a great install base within enterprise accounts. They fuel a lot of the connectivity in Starbucks, and we've talked about this in the past. So you're probably not aware, but at retail, they're quite present. And so I think they can compete effectively. I think one of the challenges that Nokia Enterprise has had is that route to market. They are a service provider focused company. They don't have an install base and enterprise like a Cisco or an HPE has. Those two latter companies are also going after the private 5G opportunity as well. At the end of the day, there are going to be multiple routes to market with respect to private 5G. It's going to be delivered as a service. You're going to have turnkey solutions. You're going to, choice is good, but it'll be interesting to see how things settle out. But I do think they have the right DNA and Cradlepoint to really make a run at the enterprise. So do you have any final thoughts?
No, not really. I think this will be an acquisition that'll take some time to realize fully. But I think I do think it's a good acquisition for them. And the Cradlepoint win at T-Mobile, I think, is going to be a big opportunity for them as well. Just because I think T-Mobile is a greenfield opportunity for enterprise, and it seems like T-Mobile's leading their FWA business with Cradlepoint on the enterprise side. So
yeah, and I'll also mention that I'll be participating in a virtual event with T-Mobile and Cradlepoint. So stay tuned to that news. But let's move to your third and final topic this week, and you want to talk about Canada. And we've talked about, I think, on prior podcasts about the Huawei and ZTE, challenges and the rip and replace that's going on. But Canada this week came out with sort of an official position on it. And you wanted to share that with our listeners and viewers.
Yes. So Canada has finally made its claims to operators in Canada that they must remove all ZTE and Huawei equipment from their networks by mid 2024. And I have a feeling that the reason why this situation took longer than maybe it should have is because Canada had its, had one of Huawei's executives in prison for a couple years.
Oh, that's
Um,
right. It was actually the founder's daughter, right?
yes. So I have a feeling that, this is a result of that being resolved. She was held in Canada until late last year.
Mhm.
So I think they were trying to figure out the diplomatic situation because I believe China was also holding some Canadians as a tit for tat, an eye for an eye, if you will.
Mhm.
And it seems like they finally announced what they were planning to do all along, saying that they want Huawei and ZTE equipment out by June 28th, 2024.
Mhm.
And that they will be able to um, stop. They also have to stop purchasing any 4G or 5G products by September of this year. Um, and that fixed wireline restrictions are also coming. So this is just for 5G networks for
Right.
now.
Right.
But yeah, this is kind of expected. Maybe a little bit later than anyone had planned, but this also bought some Canadian operators more time to do their upgrades.
Right.
And they probably were planning on upgrading their hardware anyways, because if they had any 5G or 4G equipment, that was probably due for upgrade as it was already. So
Yeah.
hopefully, they've had time to make this decision and execute upon it. But yeah, it's just I think this kind of finally closes the door on Huawei and ZTE infrastructure in the West.
It does. And I wonder if this also leads and bleeds into the enterprise as well, and not private 5G for enterprise, but enterprise networking, router, switches, and that sort of thing, because that is also a business that Huawei is in. And it's, last time I checked, it was a 12 to $14 billion business for them. So there could be a ripple effect. I mean, with 5G, infrastructure to start, but it could lead to that. It'll be interesting to see how things sort of wind out. But my friend, another great podcast. It was our 100th episode. We've been doing this for a couple of years, and I got to tell you, buddy, I really enjoy doing these with you every week, and we continue to build our subscribership, and it's just a blast. And I'm looking forward to the next 100 with you as well.
Likewise, it's been fun, and I hope we aren't boring you guys to death. Um, I'll take us home. We
Sure.
hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights for a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Slog. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.